Hi, my name is Matt Sweetnam, and I am the Chief Architect for AHEAD's Data and Analytics practice. So in today's session, I'd like to talk a little bit about transforming data into insight. So these days, I think we'd all agree that organizations have access to a seemingly unlimited amount of data. Data is structured, so sometimes it's unstructured, sometimes it's semi-structured. And along with all of that data are a bunch of new technologies. And I think we find a lot of organizations are struggling with the fact that they don't really have the tools or skills or even the operational sort of processes to harness all of that data and drive actionable insights. So what I'd like to do today is talk a little bit about what got us to this point, some of the core capabilities that we think are necessary for organizations to succeed, and then finally we want to look at the next 18 months and what we're seeing in the marketplace. So in the last 5 years or so, there's been an emergence of a couple of new user communities around data, and those are represented here at the top of this pyramid. You can see the data scientists, which we've probably all fairly familiar with, and then the citizen data scientists, which is sort of a tear off of that. At the bottom of this pyramid is the two layers that we've been working with for the last 40 years as an IT organization. Business analysts have been working with IT for a very long time, and the way that they interact with data is through curated data sets that have been provided to them via the IT organization. Using that curated data, the business analysts go through a sort of traditional SDLC process to build, essentially reports and dashboards and spreadsheets on that curated data. And they do that in a way which is very structured, and it's something that existing IT organizations are very comfortable with working with. The top of this pyramid, the data scientists, have a very different way of operating. Data science as a practice, right, is very exploratory and discovery oriented as a whole. Data scientists will come to the organization and they will want to have access to all the data that you've got in your organization at any given time. They'll want to bring in new data sets from outside of the organization. They'll also want to be able to bring in new tools anytime they feel like it might be valuable. The other thing that they do, which is different, is that they rapidly discard things that they don't need or haven't proven themselves useful. So they'll bring in data and tools, they'll test and see if there's something interesting that they can drive out of it, and then when they don't find what they were looking for, then what they want to be able to do is discard it. That process is something that as an IT organization we just have not had to support until recently. So I think what we want to talk about in the next slide or two is basically some of the things that we think will enable us as organizations to support the data science process and even the citizen data scientists that we have now adopted as part of our user community. So one of the things, some of the themes here are really trying to unblock the bottlenecks in analytics, so you can really start getting the benefits of all this data without necessarily losing control, right? Clearly we need to be able to maintain the quality, we need to be able to maintain the integrity of the data that we've got, but at the same time we need to be able to basically do all this stuff faster and with less stringent process. So how do we do all that? Well, one of the things that I think really help us move forward is a good governance and data quality practice. So it sounds maybe counterintuitive that in order to enable speed we need to then apply a new governance process, but essentially, we need to understand the data that we've got and that we're getting, and we need to have a clear process around how we evaluate data that goes into our production data environment. There have been a huge advance in the types of tools and the tools available to us that will enable us to more quickly impose data governance and data quality controls than we've ever done in the past. Tools that will enable us to intuit or infer a content structure of data automatically, right? Understand that when we bring in new data, that this data is PII data, PHI data, or any other kind of data, right? And label it and allow us to manage that data effectively. So being able to both bring in new data and manage it effectively is going to be one of the key capabilities that organizations are going to need in order to succeed in the next couple of years. Also, on top of that, if we're going to enable citizen data scientists and data scientists, they need to be able to find the data that they want when they want it. Again, there is a huge new swath of tools that make it possible for the organization, once it's got its arms around what data it has, is to describe that data effectively to users, make it available for them to see it, right, and then to give them tools to continue to evaluate its quality and usefulness. Data science democratization, organizations are going to really struggle if what we find is that in order to get insights out of all this data, we have to hire PhDs all the time. We must be able to harness some of the new technologies that are appearing, right, to support the idea of citizen data scientists. Citizen data scientists are those folks within your organization who have really deep understanding of your business, but maybe don't have a PhD in data science or physics or whatever, right? So if we can give them tools that can give them data science-like outcomes, then all of a sudden you're going to unblock some of the pipeline of getting insights from data, from raw data. And then finally, the data life cycle, the data science life cycle, I think, a lot of organizations jumped on the process around data science without actually having a life cycle around data science. That is, how do we evaluate data science through its development process? So clearly we talked about data science being exploratory and discovery-focused activity. How do we actually put some guardrails up, and then how do we evaluate the process that the data scientists are going through and the progress that they're making on their models, and then decide when we keep or jettison the work that they're doing and move on to something else or take something into production. And then once it's in production, how do we then monitor it so that we know that the models continue to bring value and they're not degrading over time, and then they can be maintained and managed. The next 18 months. So in surveying our clients and their strategies, we found that you can group a lot of the data work into 5 major buckets. Essentially, the biggest of them is going to be the data governance efforts. And for all the reasons that we mentioned in the previous slides, we're already seeing an order of magnitude increase in the number of our clients that have either started or are planning to start in the next 6 months a data governance effort. And I think that will pay dividends moving forward in terms of some of these other buckets you see up here on this slide. There's going to be attempts to address the data swamp, right? So data sprawl has gotten out of hand. We've got just a ton of data sitting out there, and nobody really understands who's using it or where it's being used or if it's being used, along with analytics. There's a lot of analytics out there. We don't know whether they're actually being used or not. So there's going to be some efforts coming up here in the next 18 months where people try to get their hands around it. Obviously getting rid of stuff that they don't use, data that they don't use, and then putting the process in place to manage it. So that would be around the governance thread we just talked about. And then more data science and analytics goes to the cloud. Data science is by its very nature very elastic in the way that it operates. go get a bunch of data, do a lot of stuff on it, run big models, and then move on to something else. So that has a very elastic profile, and cloud providers actually have support that model very well. Cloud providers also have a lot of capabilities that data scientists would take advantage of if they could, and so we're seeing more and more organizations, those that still have data science happening on-prem, moving that stuff to the cloud. There's going to be more focus on data science as a practice, so the data science lifecycle, if you will. So data science as a practice is growing up, right? It's been kind of like the Wild West, as everybody's got data, did stuff. The next 18 months, we're going to see organizations try to turn that from that very infant stage process to a more mature process where it can be managed and operated more effectively. And then finally, analytics everywhere. I think when organizations look to take advantage of data, it's going to be immediately clear that the more they stand behind just a few people who can do data science, the less work they're going to actually get done, or insights that they're going to derive. They're going to really try to push data and analytics out to their smart people throughout their organization. So that whole citizen data scientist push is going to get enabled by a host of platforms that can help people get there, and we're going to see a lot more efforts in the next 18 months to that. So thank you for your time, and I'd like to hand this off to my colleague Johnny Hatch, who will walk you through a demo of converting data into insights with a real-world example. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Johnny Hatch. I am the director of the Digital Solutions Group, and I would like to introduce you to a real-life AHEAD employee, Ross Stewart. Ross is a senior solutions architect, lives in Chicago. His superpowers are that he's part of the data and analytics team. He's also an expert in cloud computing. And Ross is part of a growing team of people that we like to call citizen data scientists. Another thing to note about Ross likes to ride bikes. Ross lives about 5 miles from the AHEAD office in downtown Chicago, and by train, takes him about 45 minutes to get there. Now, remember that Ross likes to ride bikes. And fortunately for Ross, he's got a nice protected bike trail all the way from his home to get to the office, and it only takes him about 20 minutes to get there. Well, one of the problems that Ross has is that as the weather begins to get warmer, as we move into spring and summertime, it gets hot. And by the time that Ross gets into the office, he no longer has that nice, cool, calm, collected look. Ross becomes sweaty Ross. And it's no fun to come to the office being all hot and gross and sweaty, especially with that nice blazer that Ross has on there. Well, fortunately for Ross has a subscription to the local Divvy bike, e-bike rentals. And so with an e-bike, Ross doesn't have to put forth nearly as much effort to get to the office in a timely fashion. And so now he can show up cool, calm, collected, and ready to kill it. Well, when Ross gets to the local Divvy bike station, he finds that there's often no e-bikes available. And so now this presents a big problem. Well, Ross was thinking back to what he's been doing as a citizen data scientist, and he has an idea. He can start to couple together some really cool technologies available to him and the general marketplace from folks like Amazon Web Services, Snowflake, and DataRobot. So Ross starts to put together the following architecture. He writes a Lambda function in Python that's able to go grab the availability of e-bikes from the local Divvy station because that's exposed via public API. Every 5 minutes he pulls that data and he writes it into an S3 bucket. From there, he runs it through Snowpipe to get all of that data into Snowflake because Snowflake is the centralized repository that Ross is using for all of his analytical data. Within Snowflake, he can start to do some data engineering and be able to prep and get the data ready to then plug into DataRobot. DataRobot has a nice out-of-the-box integration with Snowflake to start pulling all of that information into the MLOps platform, where Ross can quickly and easily start to create machine learning models to start to predict what's the best time that he needs to show up in order to ensure that he gets an e-bike. So from here, why don't we dive into the DataRobot platform and start understanding just how easy it is to start building a machine learning model. So here we are inside of the DataRobot platform. Now, right off the bat, it's asking us to import a data set. So this is our AI catalog here. We can either upload a local file, and so we can just give it some batch data, CSV format, multiple different formats that it accepts down here. I'm going to click on data source because recall from our architecture diagram, we want to leverage the out-of-the-box Snowflake connection. And so we're going to click on add new data source here. We can select Snowflake. We've got a whole list of options, as you can see. We can give our data connection a name, select what version we want to use, fill out some simple parameters, and then add our data connection. So simple as that. Now, I've already created the data connection, so I'm going to come back here, select Snowflake, because I've already got that set up and configured. Ross Stewart is my user, so it's going to check for my credentials here. And then automatically here, it's going to say, here are some available data sources. So we would select our data source and then create project. Now, I've already created the project, and so I'm going to cancel out of this, and we'll click over to the next tab. Because from there, once we create our project, it's going to go through an exploratory data analysis phase. Now, that's going to take about 5 minutes. And so to spare everyone the time here, let's dive right in since we've already done that phase for us. Now, within our data section to start our project, it's going to ask us, what is it that we want to predict? Now, the feature that we're targeting here is number of e-bikes available bool. And so it's a Boolean value, true, false. True, there are e-bikes available, or false, there are no e-bikes available. On the y-axis here, you can see that we've got a whole bunch of rows, 1.4 million rows of 5-minute interval data from which it has pulled in when we were pulling that API, publicly available API for DiviBike availability from our local station. On the upper right here, you can see that we've got our graph showing a visualization of our target variable plotted over time. We've got about a month and a half worth of data plotted in 5-minute intervals. Looking down here, you can see that we're dealing with time series data. Now, we can select how far back in the future we want to go to be able to create our features from, and then also how far into the future we want to look to create our predictions. Now, if we scroll down a little bit further, we can show statistic data associated with all of our features. We can drill into any of that. And then from here, what we would do is click Start and begin our project. Now, again, I've already taken the time to go through this phase. We don't need to wait 5-10 minutes here. So I'm going to click over to the next tab. And right off the bat, you can see that we're looking at our original time series data. And in this original time series data, we had 19 features that have been identified, as you can see right here. Now, clicking over to derived modeling data, you can see that there were 40 new derived features. Now, normally this would take a data scientist a bit of time to go through and create these new features. Now, remember, Ross is not a data scientist, so it's really nice that DataRobot can do this for him in a repeatable, trusted, automated fashion, save him time, and make his life a whole lot easier. And so now that we've had the opportunity to take and look at our data in a bit more depth, let's click over and actually look at the model itself. And so DataRobot went through, looked at a whole bunch of different models, and came back saying that the best model for predicting e-bike availability was a random forest classifier. In the evaluate section right here, you can see that we've got some really nice graphs and some data. We can see our ROC curve. We've got our confusion matrix here showing us data associated with true negatives, false positives, false negatives, true positives. We've got metric data under here showing area under the curve of our ROC curve. We've got our F1 score. We've got our model accuracy. You can see that we've got a model that's roughly 85% accurate, which is really great. We can drill in a little bit more, looking at forecasting accuracy. Over time, you can see that our model becomes less and less accurate. It's harder to predict e-bike availability as you go further out in the future. But in the near term, we've got some really accurate data numbers looking at the metrics associated with this y-axis here. There's a ton of information that we can dive further into. If you'd like to dive in more, look at all the different ways in which we've stitched these solutions together, leveraging AWS, leveraging Snowflake, leveraging Data Robot. I would encourage you to reach out to myself, reach out to your client director. Maybe we can even get the star of the show here, Ross, to come and talk with us about his journey doing data science, about the ease in which he was able to create this machine learning model and how it's affected his daily commute to and from the office. But right now, I'm going to turn it over to Rob Corey. Rob's got a great customer interview for us. And so, Rob, take it away.
Jim, good to see you.
Hey, how are you, Rob? It's great to see you too.
I'm doing really well. So, Jim, I appreciate you helping to do this. I think this is
my pleasure. I'm excited.
Yeah, good. So, Jim, I've known you for a while. Obviously, we've had a relationship since 2018. But I'd love for you to give the team or give the audience kind of a overview of your background. I think it's significant.
Yeah, so appreciate that. So let me just start with the company that I'm at right now. So I'm with Altus Biologics, and that company does in-office infusion management. And for those of you that are not familiar with infusion management, many of the chronic conditions, in Crohn's, you have Crohn's kind of in the GI space, MS in the neurospace, and many people have heard about rheumatoid arthritis. Those are kind of some of the conditions that, unfortunately, as a last resort, many patients need kind of regular treatments. I don't know if you guys have seen the new commercial for Ocrevus, and they walk around with the two. It's twice a year for MS. That's one of our treatments that we do. But we provide these services to physicians. And so we go into the physician's office. We set up an infusion lab, infusion suite, so we speak. We staff the nurses. We buy the drugs. We bill it. We bring onboard the patients. So it's kind of like infusion services in a box in the doctor's office. And so that's kind of what we do as a company. Anyway, long story short, I joined the company back in late 2018. Was asked to join by a group of us that were working at Express Scripts. I joined the organization. So so prior to joining Altus Biologics, I was Chief Technology and Strategy Officer for the Federal Reserve System. Actually was working on a pretty cool project at the time. I was involved with leading and co-leading their digital currency strategy, which is the Bitcoin, or what they call FedCoin. So we were very much working on that back in 2017, 2018 even. I know there's been some new press on that recently, but I was involved with kind of the early onset of that, with all the Bitcoin hype and everything else that was going on back then. So I was involved with that, as well as I was working on kind of a cross system data strategy. So those are kind of my two things there. But prior to joining the Federal Reserve, as I mentioned, Express Scripts, I was Chief Technology Officer at Express Scripts. And Express Scripts is one of the largest PBMs, now part of Cigna, Pharmacy Benefit Manager. And I was Chief Technology Officer there and involved with a lot of their data strategy, their acquisition, and their rapid growth. Just so you know, for those of you that didn't know the history of Express Scripts, it was actually one of the only two stocks that was growing faster than Apple during the 2000s. So
is that right? Wow. So
yes.
That was one of those hyper growth companies.
Hyper growth companies that was going on there. So that gives you a little bit of my background here. Like I said, a group of Express Scripts executives joined on here with Altus Biologics. The infusion management space is growing rapidly. Lots of new drugs coming to market. In fact, if you watch enough of these advertisements right now, you see these drugs come to market. You're like, what is this drug doing? Why have I never heard of it? And why isn't it in a bottle? It's really these bigger drugs that are coming to market, bigger molecule drugs that need to either be injected or infused. And this is really the space where pharmaceutical manufacturers are really doing a lot of their innovation right now. Sorry, I get a little excited about this. Sorry, Rob.
Oh, that's cool. So Jim, what kind of enticed you to come over to a company, a smaller company, kind of a
well, it's all about it's all about the growth. And I'm a personally, I like to grow, work in organizations. My tenure at Express Scripts was hyper growth, and with those things comes opportunities. And you don't find a lot of those in the technology IT space out there. There's a lot of, hey, we're going to go maintain this and whatever else. So I had the opportunity at Express Scripts, a couple jobs before that. My opportunity at the Fed, though, wasn't growth oriented. It was really kind of new innovation, new frontier stuff. But this one, with kind of my former colleagues that I worked with in the past, we kind of joined arms together to come in here to look at this hyper growth thing. And the company itself has grown about 300% over the course of the 3 years. And that even includes the COVID down years. So we've had a pretty rapid growth. When I joined the organization, we were doing about 45,000 treatments a year on patients. And right now we're on target for this year to be over 110,000 treatments. So just seeing that kind of growth over that time period it's been exciting.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And come talk a little bit about, I think it was interesting when I think back in 2019 and some of the challenge that you brought up and where you were from a technology perspective, as well as kind of what your aspirations were for the organization.
Yeah. So, there's a longer story to the acquisition and why they brought in this team here, but it was growth oriented because they saw so much, we'll call it dry powder in the base business, that they really needed to get, it was a company that was still being run by the founders, entrepreneurs that really did some great work to get the foundation with some strong clients. But the opportunity was really to grow this. And in order to grow it, they needed to scale. And the scale they needed to do was both on, just the foundation with process and people, but also on the technology front. And that technology was really in two different areas. One was we needed to drive some, custom automation that we needed to do to kind of help scale the processes. But we were sitting on a ton of data, and really we're not leveraging the data for any kind of great insights. And as you look at healthcare, and many people here with healthcare, you have so many different stakeholders or constituents that you need to deal with. If you just think about our business and what we were in, we're partnering with the physicians. That's who's our client and customers. But as I look at that relationship with the physicians, we have a common stakeholder in the patient. So in a lot of ways, the doctors call us to help take care of their patients. So you got those two. But then you're buying drug, which you go through a drug supply chain, which then gets into the pharmaceutical manufacturer side of it. You're getting reimbursed and paid by the insurance companies that are across the board. So in our case, you look at the 4 Ps of healthcare: pharma, payer, provider, and patient. And we're intimately involved with all of those people. And you look at those, and that our data set could be used to develop a stronger relationship and stronger insights, not only to our business, but for our stakeholders across the board. For instance, as we're just rolling it forward as an example, how do we deal with patient adherence? In many of these cases, as I kind of highlighted, these drugs are a last resort. And the last thing you want to do, and some of these drugs, unfortunately, these patients have to show up once a month for a 2-hour infusion. The last thing you want them to do is, once, they're on board for 4 weeks, and then it's 5 weeks, and then it's 6 weeks. And before you know it, it's 8 weeks and they're back in the hospital. And so looking at things such as adherence is kind of is where we saw some of the opportunities with our data that we just didn't have out of the gate.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. It is interesting to see kind of the end-to-end solution that Altus provides. I mean, a lot of intricacies as you get to know your business.
Yeah.
So, kind of talk about a little bit, maybe Jim, your vision and kind of when Ahead came in to help Altus, talk a little bit about where you were from a technology perspective and some of the challenges that you were up against and things that you were trying to solve.
Yeah. So we went into, we were walking into a very data rich environment. The whole data's the new oil kind of thing. We had lots of oil. We had no technology on what to do with it. And to be honest with you, some of the people that were operating the business were really kind of novices when it came to managing data. So we were really we saw a gold mine of opportunity, but really limited infrastructure and limited know-how on not just to get at the data, but to use the data. So I've run into this situation before when we were at Express Scripts, and I've seen it, through my networking and working with other companies. and even at the Federal Reserve. The challenge that you face with the easy thing is to try to boil the ocean. You sit here and you look at so many of these opportunities. Even as I was talking about adherence here, adherence was like project 17. It wasn't even project one, even though it's a real easy one to get to. And the thing that is always concerning to me is people that want to go and try to boil the ocean and get everything they can into the data warehouse. And even though the cloud technologies and the data warehouse technologies that you have out there, the data, data lake technologies allow you to load so much data into it. If you don't take the time to focus on your business outcomes or what do you want to get out of the data at the end of the day, it doesn't really, you're just going to go and spend a whole bunch of time getting a whole bunch of data, paying Amazon or Azure or Google a whole bunch of money, but you're not going to get any business outcomes. And so we actually started with the end in mind. And one of the big questions that everybody had, and this was a really basic question: how many treatments did we do yesterday? And what drugs did we treat yesterday? And how many patients do we have on the schedule tomorrow? And so those kind of three questions was the anchor point on what we wanted to try to do. And so we did kind of we'll call it an accelerator program in partnership with AHEAD to kind of build a data hub. But our only three outputs on this was going to be those three outputs. And so we focused in on, we did a survey of kind of what data we needed to go and do it. And we didn't pull in all the data that we needed. And then we wanted to engineer the data that we needed to get to. And it very quickly, we got the technology stood up, we got the cloud infrastructure stood up, we got the Redshift going. We went down the Tableau online path, even though we could have bought the Tableau license and put it into the AWS environment. We decided to go with the Tableau online environment. All things to do to focus on acceleration of the technology, but to get to the business results. And what we were able to do in about 8 weeks from the time we started is we got what we affectionately call our flash report, which rolls out every single day. It shows how many treatments we have done yesterday, shows how many treatments we've done month to date. It breaks it down by drug, it breaks it down by client, it breaks it down by a handful of other dimensions. And this report is all in Tableau. You can cut and slice and dice it whatever way. And that one report has spurred the creativity and imagination of the organization. We send that report out every single day, and still it's kind of in its original form. We send it out every single day to not only the executive team and other leaders across the organization. Our board of directors wants it. They want to see what's going on. And for us, it really gave us the ability to be able to go and do that. But look, people are like, oh, that sounds great, and whatever you want to try to do. But let me just tell you, there are some things that you're going to learn along the way in this, my lessons learned on this, or the things that people are going to hesitate with. We are on at least iteration 3 of our data model. So that first data model was, you could call it iteration 1. I knew going into this that we were eventually going to have to go through multiple iterations on the data model. And people are always kind of worried about that sunk cost or that kind of refactoring the whole thing. With the technology that you got right now, pick your technology of the day. The technology is not your limitation. In many cases, it's your accelerator. But you have to know that you can't, if you try to boil the ocean, you're going to be stuck getting all kinds of great data together. But the real challenge you're going to run into is people using the data. And as I was walking into this, we didn't have any there. We needed to train the organization on how to use data. But we also had to train the organization on how to, I don't want to get overhung up on this word, but data governance. You need to be able to govern and master the data. And we quickly learned as we were doing our analysis here that there were some areas of master data or even reference data that really needed to get matured. For instance, one of the things that we had was we allowed our clients and some of our frontline staff just to, in a text box, enter in the insurance information for the patient. So you can imagine the classic Blue Cross Blue Shield. You get BCBS Illinois, you get BCBS IL, you get Blue Cross Blue Shield IL, you get Blue Cross Blue Shield Illinois, and then you throw in the hyphens and the spaces and the dashes and whatever else. You got a half a dozen or a dozen different ways for that one insurance. Same way with the drug. We realized that some of our drugs, we weren't using kind of drug standards like NDC as kind of those things along the way. But that's where you start to, as you get the infrastructure in place, and that's why you have to realize your data model is going to change. So that first report we created with this kind of ad hoc, low quality or low fidelity insurance information or drug information, we had to go and rejigger that so that we go and create a master table that's being managed someplace else, that was going in there, that we then had to join across a couple of the different systems we brought the data into it. That first thing out of the gate, we didn't care, because we had to go and show people what you could do with this. And then they needed to understand for themselves, so that you had one of the founders, one of the entrepreneurs, they're like, why do I have 6 Blue Cross Blue Shields of Illinois? They all look like the same thing to me. Oh, great. Now let's go get a project to go clean up the data. So anyway, I'm rambling a lot on this, Rob.
Well, Jim, I love the fact that you did that, though. You came in quick. You had a vision. You knew that you wanted to build up kind of an analytics hub. Frankly, at the time, you'd had a bunch of different applications. Wasn't a lot in the cloud. I think you chose,
right.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on why you chose to go to the cloud as opposed to building it internally. And some of the thought process.
I can answer that in one thing. I have toured enough data centers. I have dealt with enough disaster recovery tests. I have built my shared data centers to know that I want to never own a server again, as far as I'm concerned. And, a little tangent here, and you can, tell me what it is. We had a cybersecurity summit for the private equity company. And I actually had the opportunity to bring in the former CISO for the Federal Reserve System. Brilliant guy. And he came in and he said, because we got into this discussion, the cloud, there's so much history that the cloud is so much more insecure and all kinds of other stuff. Guys, I don't know if you've heard this or not. I was actually just reading a McKinsey article last night. There are, I think last I heard, at least 50,000 unfilled cybersecurity jobs in this country. And do you want to be the one trying to find that cybersecurity expert to make sure that your servers in your data center are protected correctly? Or do you go give it to Amazon or Google or Microsoft or IBM or Oracle or whatever these other guys? These guys are going to outbid you. I already know what these guys are going to pay for it. And secondly, them getting that company having a cyber event in your environment because they couldn't protect it correctly is going to do a lot more damage than it's going to do to you. So I'm a big fan of, when it comes to infrastructure and cyber, within reason. I'm a big fan to say you can't do it better than some of the experts, and you can't pay enough that Amazon or Microsoft or Google are going to pay. So you're better off buying it than trying to build it.
And it was nice that you were a good enough sized company that you could do that, and you could start there. So you started in the cloud, so it makes it.
Yeah, so I made the decision to go in the cloud. And by the way, you just got to jump in. These things, you roll the clock back. Even when I started this in 2018, Google really wasn't a major cloud player. They were kind of an entrant into this, and they're now kind of jumping into it. Guys, you just pick one. And I hate to say it, you're going to have a little vendor lock-in for a while, but you just got to pick one.
So tell me this, so you say that 2018, 2019 is when we started building. You started building a lot of these tools, technologies, data environment, so forth. Part of the thing I always thought was interesting is you were an innovator. You were building almost faster in some cases than the business was able to consume some of the data that you're building. Were there some other, are there some key takeaways that you've learned, looking back a couple of years, what you would have done differently, challenges that you've run into that you?
I do think there's a couple of things on this, especially when your business partner is not as data savvy on this. You need to make sure that you bring in the right resources and teams that can address this. Rob, you're right. We did outpace the business for a little while, and then we decided as a group in partnership with you to scale the team back a little bit so that we could actually meet the business where it is. I mean, what you're going to get into is that these engineers are going to very, very quickly outrun the business. And it's great and it's exciting, but at the same time, you also have to have, if the business can't adopt it or use it, you're to a certain extent, you're wasting money. But you have to go and be there, meet the business where they're. The second thing on this is you're going to need to work on the people that you have on your analytics organization have got to be a little bit more on the Renaissance space. In other words, you can't have the person that wants to only do the coding and doesn't want to talk to the business or doesn't want to face off with this. As you move into this, and especially in the data space, it's the kind of the classic IT things that, this is the requirements person, and this is the design person, and this is the builder, and this is the tester. Many of the roles that we need to fill inside of this in the data space, especially starting off, have really got to be these multi-headed, multi-hat, multifaceted kind of people that can very quickly understand the business problem you're trying to solve, and in many cases, help the business see the problem, and then jump back into the technology. And so you just have to, as a practitioner, as a kind of somebody that's building it, it's real easy to go and segment the skills, but you really need to have a couple people that are really that anchor, that understand the business or start to learn the business, can also understand the data, and also kind of then work with the technology. And with the accelerator tools out there, whether they're cloud-based or off the shelf, those tools are so good at getting you there. You finding those people are the key to the success. And I had the opportunity, to a certain extent, I got lucky. The team that, Rob, you and I assembled, in a relatively small team, in a very, very quick order, was able to go and do this because of the people we brought to the table, their experiences and their kind of their style. That at the end of the day was really the key success factor in this.
It was fun, Jim. It was fun. It was fun to do. You look back at, there's always some challenges along the way. We did some course corrections as we needed to, but you've been a great partner, and it's been a great journey.
Well, and Rob, I think that's the key on this, is going into the data space and trying to, especially in the dynamic environment that most businesses are in right now, where you start and where you end are going to change. So you just have to be prepared that you're going to have to give this thing care and feeding, and there's going to be iterations of your data model, maybe even a little bit iterations of your technology, to kind of go and meet the business where it is. And luckily, with the cloud and the capabilities and the technologies that are out there right now, these kind of iterations aren't in the course of years. They're really in the course of weeks, maybe a month or two. And that's the thing you just have to realize going into it. This is no longer, hey, I want to go replace C++ with Java, or, heaven forbid, do something with my old mainframe COBOL. This is stuff where, hey, we got to go and, we need to add these 5 fields, and we want to add this master data, and we want to do this. Let's just kind of reimagine the thing. And by the way, you don't even have to touch the old stuff, because you can just go create new stuff. And
absolutely,
it's so much fun.
So Jim, let me ask you this. So, talk a little bit about where you came from 2018 till now, and some of the recent discussions we've had. We've had some planning sessions in the last couple of quarters, and about where you see the future. I love some of the AI ML thought process you have around.
Like I said, once I got this data and we can start to do the correlation, there is just so much we can start to piece together in regards to where this goes. Let me go back to the adherence problem. The interesting thing is patient adherence to therapy, medication, or even things like physical therapy is the biggest win-win-win inside of healthcare. And let me just tell you why. On the patient side, clearly they're feeling better. Their quality of life is going to continue to be maintained. On the payer side, they're not paying for adverse events or these kinds of one-time hospitalizations. On the manufacturer side, or the pharmaceutical side, they've got a constant stream of treatments that they're getting into it. Nobody's losing. But at the same time, adherence to medication is, in many cases, whether it's even pill-based or in our case, infusion-based, sometimes it takes a while for these things to take hold and take effect. And sure, the effects of not taking them take a little bit of while to kind of go off. But to me, adherence is one of the biggest things that, to me, is we can go get to. One of these things that we're looking at from an AI/ML point of view is, can we create an adherence risk score for the individual before they ever take therapy? I can tell you every single patient that's not maintaining their therapy, I can give them scores, and I can go and red light, green them, yellow light them, whatever reports. But is there a way that I can find out for that patient before we even put them and give them their first treatment? Can we find out what their risk scores, what their risk or what their adherence risk is going to be? And can we start to put together ways to deal with them and keep them on therapy better? Is there things like we need to go and give them more text messages? Do we need to give them an app on the technology side? Do we even need to hire, a nurse or somebody that just calls them, kind of helps them through those processes to kind of keep them more adherent? And there's so much we can do in that space that I think is really a benefit, benefits so many people. But this is where I look at the opportunity that we face in with kind of, AI and machine learning to help drive this, to find out the problem before we need to have it, and before we experience it. And that's one of the ones that we're very excited about. And with the history of the data and the things that we now have in place, and looking at all the different patients that we have, this is an area that we are definitely going to be exploring as we kind of get into the future of what we want to be able to offer our patients.
So exciting things, Jim. And those are things not only just for your organization, healthcare in general. I think adherence is going to be a problem for any healthcare organization.
It is going to be a problem on this stuff. And if you start to think about the evolution of personalized medicine, genomic based medications, and what we've been able to do. I mean, we just saw all of this with all of these COVID vaccines that came out, and how they're really creating a different way to help people stay healthy. And how that is just going to open the door for personalized medicine. Personalized medicine is only going to work if you actually take the medication. And so you still got to get back to it. This is going to be the age-old problem of, hey, how do you stay healthy? How do you take your medication? These are real human problems that I think with the technologies that we got in front of us, we can have an impact.
So Jim, great talking with you. I think that we hit on several different topics today. Certainly appreciate the fact that you were kind of an early innovator, thought about how you could use technology to your advantage. I'm so happy we could help kind of build your early analytics hub environment, evolve that over the last 3 years, I guess now. You touched on a lot of things I think were very interesting. Some of the challenges that you or any organization is going to run into around building analytics. You got to start somewhere. And some of the challenges, I think they're real life challenges. Getting the business involved, making sure that you're at pace with where your business is at the point at which you're providing some of this technology. And I love the idea, and as you mentioned, a lot of healthcare organizations are running the same things. Adherence, how do you, if you can actually build some algorithms that allow you to predict somebody's adherence to a drug or therapy or a visit, that's certainly an excellent thing to aspire to. So look forward to helping you with those here in the future. And thanks for being such a great partner, Jim.
Rob, I appreciate the partnership, and I think it's really true. It's the partnership on this stuff. And as I mentioned, the people are the key to the success of our initiatives. The technology is interchangeable at times, but I really think it's getting the right common focus in the partnership, and then getting the right people on the project to really understand where in my case, the customer is, and be able to deliver on those needs. And Rob, I've had some tough conversations at times where
we have, sure.
You've told me to stay on track, and I've told you we need to change direction. So
absolutely.
No, it's been great. I appreciate the time.
I think that's what a good partnership is, and we really appreciate that about you and the Altus team, Jim.
Sounds good. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks.